Okay, so sorry everyone for that technical issue. We lost the stream for a second, but we're back. So let's just start where we left off, Laura.
Yeah.
Again, about your what you like the most about your job.
So where I left off, for those of you who don't know, the Global Hawk is an unmanned air vehicle. So um, it is flown by itself, but we have pilots at ground stations. And per FAA regulations, we cannot flight test air vehicles in civilian airspace without having eyes on at all times. So we have a chase car and a chase plane. So my last day on my job in Palmdale, I was able to participate in basically a flight test. And as the Global Hawk was coming back from a mission test, and it was like coming down and ready to like land on our runway, I was in the chase car and we got to chase the Global Hawk down the runway to keep eyes to make sure everything was okay while it was landing. And it was the absolute coolest experience I've ever had on the job. I don't know if I'll ever have an experience cooler than that. But it definitely, being close to the hardware and working production and doing the things that Northrop does is like my favorite part about being at this company and my favorite part of the job.
Great. Now let's talk about what you find the most challenging.
So the most challenging thing is within the aerospace industry as a whole. This is an issue that they are dealing with altogether, is the loss of tribal knowledge. So essentially, aerospace was booming a few decades ago, and the industry was growing and growing and growing, and then we had to slow down. And when there was that slowdown, the companies weren't, because there was no budget and funding. A lot of aerospace budgeting and funding comes from the government. So unless the government has a need, the industry starts going through a lull. And there was a gap in hiring. So within the last, I would say, decade, there has been more hiring. And there's a huge gap in the middle for knowledge. And then we have a ton of experienced professionals that are also on their way to retirement. So I think the most challenging thing for me is figuring out how to gain as much knowledge as possible from people that are exiting and having not as much experience, or very experience that is spread super thin, because everybody needs to reach out to these individuals to learn a lot about our hardware, because a lot of it isn't documented as much as it could be, or there was no need back then because everybody kind of knew what was going on. People stayed in the industry longer. So I think the hardest thing is dealing with that knowledge gap at Northrop. So being pretty much a fresh new hire, or not necessarily new hire, but entry-level engineer still, and dealing with not knowing where to find things, or there's like little tricks of the trade for how some of our antennas are built, where like, unless when we have very experienced technicians that I'm able to reach out to and go down to like our shop floor and ask, hey, like, you've built this before, do you know this? And I think that capturing that like knowledge that's on its way out of the company is the most challenging part of my job.
Great. So we're getting a few questions from the chat box. So let's start with Tristan here. So what skills do you suggest learning as a mechanical engineering undergrad?
So I think it depends what you find most interesting. Therefore, I think to figure that out, getting involved in design competitions at your school are the most valuable things you can do for your engineering degree and for the growth of your career. I participated in my school's SAE Baja team, and while I was helping out with that, I kind of fell into an operations role, figuring out how we're going to build our hardware, put things together, what order we're going to do things in, and getting my team organized. And from there, I knew I liked the production environment in engineering more so than the design phase. I found frustration with the design phase, and I like the more concreteness of the production environment, whereas design, although you're given requirements, there's a ton of great design. So I think like the most valuable thing you can do for yourself is gaining that like type of work experience. And internships, if you do want to go into design, for example, like knowing your softwares, like CAD softwares, ANSYS, or even, like gaining more experience with MATLAB, because you will within design need to use those tools. And another invaluable thing is networking. I think it's always great to reach out to people and like hear about their experiences to help you figure out what you want to do. And, you know, always maintaining a strong critical thinking and always looking for a solution, even when things look hard and it seems impossible. I think the most valuable thing you can do is to always be solution driven as opposed to problem driven.
Great. Another question here from Daniel. What skills did you learn in school that you use in your career? And what skills do you wish you would have learned in school?
So, because I don't do design, a lot of what I do day to day isn't extremely technical in terms of getting down to the like nitty gritty. So I don't use a ton of what I learned in school for my job. I think the degree definitely gives you a large frame of reference of understanding the piece parts of the whole entire puzzle. So, for example, I know who to reach out to when there's something wrong with the hardware that like is the expert behind that specific unit. And I know what questions I can ask, or like if we're going to use a tool, I'll know, hey, if we're going to hold the object in this orientation and we have it mounting on some fasteners in a horizontal angle, I know that like what the moment looks like and it could damage the connections on the antennas, so, or on the units. And it's just, it gives you a more holistic view of like how the hardware can be damaged or the best way to put things together. But like in terms of specific skills, they're just problem solving. And outside of that, I don't necessarily use a ton of what I use in my degree for my job. A lot of it is learning the company processes about how they like to do things. So working at a large corporation as opposed to a startup there's a lot of processes that are already set out for you to like follow and to use as guidelines to help you complete your job, as opposed to, let's say, something small like a startup where you would be on the front end of that and developing those processes, where it would be more beneficial to, you know, like get more technical and like have that background or like use those skills.
What soft skills do you think are the most important in your role?
I'm sorry, you said sub skills?
Soft
skills.
Yeah.
Oh, communication 100%. I am always reaching out to people all day. A lot of things, for example, something we do in industry is that we proof load inserts. So what that means is if we have like a bushing that's going into a composite panel, we want to verify that the bonding is strong enough for when the unit gets put on the entire bird, and that with vibration testing, it's not going to fall out and it's going to pass everything. So a requirement that gets driven down from the entire bird is like a proof load test that we apply a certain amount of weight and force to the bushing, and then we would, for example, pull out the insert and then see if it passes the requirement, the load requirement. So for example, for something like that, I need to coordinate who's going to complete the test. I need to get my responsible design engineer there to witness the test to make sure it's meeting all the design requirements. And then I need to coordinate things like that. Also, you know, just being easy to work with and like pretty pleasant goes a long way with helping people to help you get your things done. A challenge in space as opposed to, for example, aircraft or even like automotive industry is that we do a lot of one-off units. So a lot of things aren't automated and you need to kind of be the one pushing that hardware. So I think soft skills and communication skills, like just being able to ask for what you need clearly and concisely, and then obviously doing so in a very respectful manner and knowing that everyone else is busy goes a long way at Northrop specifically.
Thank you, Laura. Can you tell us more about how what the interview process is like at Northrop?
So I interviewed at Northrop 3 years ago, and I applied online through their I believe like they had a location where you could do kind of like, it was like a college student resume data dump, and you just kind of like sent your resume in there and like hope for the best. So I got reached out to for an interview. The process was fairly simple. they had my resume and they kind of paired me up with a requisition that they thought would be a good fit for me. And they're like, hey, we're interested in you for XYZ role. And we'd like to interview you for it. And I got on for like an hour interview. It was actually virtual because I lived in New York at the time, and Northrop, the location I interviewed for was in California. And it was just an hour-long interview. It was a lot of, I think, Northrop does look for technical expertise and like a strong understanding of your foundation. They want to make sure that they're looking for people that they can teach, that like have a good foundation that they can teach and are easy to work with. And I think a lot of it is personality and fit, you know, making sure they're getting the right kind of people together. And then within 2 weeks of my interview, I got a job offer and I accepted, and here I am.
Great. As a new hire at Northrop Grumman specifically, what do you recommend doing to hit the ground running?
So something that I struggled with is, and I think this goes for a lot of people coming into schools, you really want to take on a lot of ownership of your work, and it's a bit slow in the beginning. So it takes a while to get like trained up, and like obviously having a positive attitude is the number one thing you can do for yourself in your career, and like being patient with the growth, because although, for example, like myself, I thought I knew everything. Once you start working and like you're in your area, you learn that there's a lot more for you to learn. So I think the best thing you can do to like set yourself up for a great career, let's say at Northrop, is to work hard, be positive, and then understand like things and learning takes patience. So it takes like a whole career for some of these people to develop the things that they've developed. So it's just having that grit and being willing to learn, and then taking on opportunities as they come to you, is my number one piece of advice for being successful starting out at Northrop. And then also getting involved in other extracurriculars at work. So like school, you're involved in clubs. We have clubs at Northrop too, but they're called employee resource groups. So I'm on a board of one of them right now. It's called Gen to Gen, which is generation to generation. And the whole idea behind generation to generation is to bridge the gap at Northrop, the generational gap. So as I spoke about previously, our tribal knowledge, that's something that's very important to me. I want to capture as much knowledge as possible in my department and get it documented. And I think Gen to Gen provides a social way to, you know, network between generations and create a more comfortable environment for people to express themselves and learn from each other, and then, you know, build those networks to facilitate that knowledge transfer. So things like that, I think will definitely set you up, because it builds up leadership and you're on your day-to-day job working on your technical skills.
Going back to your interview, how did you market yourself as a strong candidate during the application process?
I think things that helped me stand out, I did have a security clearance beforehand from another internship. That's something that is in high demand at aerospace and defense companies. So I think that definitely helped my resume get viewed at the company. And then from there, I had a very strong academic background. I did well in school. So I think that definitely attributed to my resume getting picked out from like how many applicants they've had or people who've submitted their resumes. And then having serving on like boards at school. I was on our ASME. I was the president of our ASME club at school and our Mechanical Engineering Honor Society. So I had those two leadership experiences under my belt, and then a few internships. And then I also co-founded a startup while I was in college through NYU's like 300K Stern entrepreneurship competition. So I think I showed my soft skills through my startup competition, and, you know, developing pitch decks and pitching to potential investors. And that like helped me, you know, solidify my soft skills and show that they've served me by being a semifinalist in that competition. And then other internships, you know, developing my technical experience as well as my SE Baja team. So I think holistically, I think all of that together helped my resume get viewed.
Any particular internship that you took that you think made a strong impact on your application?
So I had 2 internships. One was when I was between sophomore and junior year, It was at a small company that does tarping for semi trucks. So from there, I learned a ton about manufacturing processes. I think like I got a lot of hands-on experience about how we build like the unit that goes on the semi truck. So there's a ton of welding, what manufacturing flows look like, and working with the shop floor there and documenting their experience definitely gave me a ton of insight about how to put things together, which I then used in my SAE Baja team to help us, develop our manufacturing flow there. And I also interned at a company in New Jersey called LGS Innovations, which is a tiny defense contractor as well. But they did get, I believe, they got bought into another company. I cannot remember the other company's name, but from there I had like a little bit of experience working on some defense products and developing some skill sets. And then a task I was assigned with over the summer was to like help design the lab floor. So where they're getting new machines and stuff, and being like, hey, if you want to do XYZ, what order do you want to put these machines in so we can have like a complete process to develop XYZ parts. So like that, those two things I think help with my experience.
Thank you, Laura. And then I think you, just before, I guess we started this, the webinar today, there was something that you wanted to share with us as far as a really cool program at Northrop, the rotational program.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so Northrop has a newer rotational development program. I know a lot of other companies do it. It's 3 years long, and you pretty much have 3 12-month long rotations, my bad. And from there, the idea is Northrop wants to retain the talent it hires, especially once they start investing in you. So the idea behind it is, I know like myself and many others, going from college to industry, it's kind of hard to figure out what you want to do or what you see yourself doing your whole life without trying a few things. So the idea behind it is to get exposure to a bunch of different disciplines you'd be interested in, so you can figure out what your fit at Northrop is. And then while only, like it benefiting you, figuring out what you want to do, it also benefits the company long-term because you're developing like a breadth of skills. For example, I mostly was in production. So for me, like I didn't necessarily go try out design, but I know people who went from production to design to test. I served a bunch of different types of product in production, and that was like more of like what my rotation was geared towards. I worked on composites and some structure assemblies. So I worked on the more static part of the entire vehicle that we build, and then moving towards antennas now, which is a completely different domain for me, since I do have a mechanical background and not like electrical or computer, dealing with RF and like learning all of the other things that come alongside that program. Also, once you're in it, there are other specific professional development opportunities for you. There's specific webinars or resources for you to help get you going with your career at Northrop. I think rotational programs are beneficial, especially if you have not figured out or what you're passionate about yet. And especially to like see different areas of the business, because I also worked in aeronautics, and then from aeronautics went to space systems. And I'm able to compare the two and see what things I like about the two, and like figure out from there, where I would like my career to go long-term, getting that exposure.
And what are the different, I guess, career path then that you can take on from here, I guess, at Northrop?
So for myself specifically, where I like in my department, so I work, like our department is called MEO, so Manufacturing Engineering Operations, and the typical career path is you come in and you kind of work as a like a process planner, what I'm doing now, and you're just like, you're a technical contributor, and then from there on you become a you switch into or like transition into the project manufacturing engineer role. We call them PMEs, and that's when you become like an introductory like leader. So, getting everyone together, conducting design reviews, reviewing design for manufacturability, making sure we have our tools in place and we have everything ready, and like being that point of contact from the design and test world to the actual production. And then it helps you build technical a technical foundation for then becoming a technical leader, which is a sub-program manager. And that's pretty much, they deal with a ton of scheduling and budgeting and making sure we can deliver our hardware to the next area, which is integration and test, so it can get tested and then integrated onto the bus. So that's what like the typical career development path looks like for someone like myself in my current role. And then from there, I mean, you can also then, as you do project manufacturing engineering, you can go be the responsible design engineer for that hardware. So now you know how it's built. Now you can work on the design side, you know, like really figure out where those requirements are coming from. I think there's a ton of room for mobility in Northrop. And if you, after a few years, decide you want to try something new, there's a ton of opportunity there. We do so much at Northrop.
Great. I have a follow-up question from Noah here on the pathway program. So with the Northrop Grumman matrix and with the pathways program, how would you recommend finding your spot within the company, and how helpful were your functional managers in the process?
So I think Northrop, since I've started the Pathways program, the program itself has grown a ton. Beforehand, it didn't have a ton of structure, which had pros and cons. So if there was a role that you wanted to take on, then is it like, let me rephrase this. I know other companies have specific like pathways or like rotations you would do. It's like, we'll start you here and then you go here and then you go here, and that's a completion of your program. And then, they will set you up with something to, after you graduate your program, a role to fulfill. At Northrop, we're sort of gaining more structure. It's not a forced structure, but when I was starting, a lot of it was me reaching out to people. My functional was able to like push on some management if I wasn't able to get like feedback, or, if I wasn't getting a response. He was able to leverage his position to get some feedback from me or a response from other management. But a lot of it for me was on my own hands, like in my own hands. And I definitely would, look at our internal job, post, and from there decide which roles interested me, and then, cold emails to managers and set up some phone calls to learn more about what they do in their organization and if it's something that was like a good fit for me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Laura. So I think we've gone through most of the questions on the chat box here. So please, for the audience here, keep bringing more questions to us. So the one thing that I wanted to, that I always ask also our guest speaker, Laura, is in terms of your experience so far with the Northrop, what has been your favorite project? Anything that you can share with us?
I think so. The one thing about Northrop, as opposed to I think like some other companies, is that we get massive programs. So it takes an army to build absolutely everything we do. So it's more difficult to have like a favorite like project to work on as opposed to like a program. I do think although space has like a ton of appeal, I think aircraft appeals to my more efficient side. We do build more aircraft than we do like space vehicles. So when I want to, optimize operations and imply like some lean principles, it's more easier to do something in space. I meant aircraft because we have the budget, because we're going to be building more and more of them. So therefore it serves us more to invest that money up front to, figure out how to make it the most efficient way. Whereas space, we have it's a low rate production. So it makes it difficult to develop those efficiencies. So it's a frustration of mine too. I like refuse to believe this is the only way we can do things in space. And I know Northrop is working towards, like optimizing our processes and getting like we're undergoing a digital transformation right now, trying to like make things better for everyone and make our jobs a bit easier and, get more with the times on how we do things. So I guess my favorite project, I did really like working in Palmdale, working out of aircraft hangars is really cool. Watching like the B-2, do flight tests is also insanely rewarding, even though I did not support that program. So I guess that answers your question a bit.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Laura. as a mechanical engineer, what is your take on having computer science knowledge in the industry?
I think computer science is a skill everyone should have. I wish I got to do more coding. I think it definitely helps with how you have more tools in your belt for how you want to do your processes. For example, within process planning, I've developed a new way to do our planning. So a frustration of mine was once I started working on larger drawing packages, which had like the assembly level drawing and then like 6 sub level drawings that I had to go through and like, make sure I was making like all of our requirements were being met in production and like they were accurate and nothing was missed, because if something's missed, we're not going to give we're not going to deliver quality hardware, and then we're going to kill some schedule and budget at the same time. And that's something I want to avoid always in my job. So I also believe I'm doing a great job when I figure out how to make my job obsolete. So automating things means I'm doing a great job to myself. I'm never worried about losing a job. There's always something else to fix. But so for computer science, how this ties in is I've like developed an object-oriented style of planning. So I'm able to list all of my requirements and like kind of like track them as I'm like figuring out how I'm putting things together. So, through Visio, developing my actual flows as I figure parts of it out, and then being able to cross out when you have like 50 drawing notes that get applied to different parts, it gets difficult to keep track of everything. So I think, like, for example, with computer science, you could develop a tool, a little template where you can start inputting your own data and have it build it out for you. So I think computer science is always a valuable skill to have, especially when it comes to wanting to like optimize things, and wherever you are, even within design, it's useful for conducting what's it called, calculations, like long and tedious calculations, or iterations of calculations. I think it's an invaluable skill.
What do you think you would be doing if you didn't work for Northrop or in this field?
So I started out on my engineering, career, going to school for it because I love cars. I'm a huge automotive fan, and I initially was structuring my entire career about working in the automotive industry. And growing up with immigrant parents, and then not being aware of the aerospace and defense space here in the US, and not really seeing any of these products on a day-to-day basis. For example, you may fly on a commercial vehicle, but you don't get to see the products that I currently work on a day-to-day. I didn't know it was an option for me until I did more research and had a security clearance. It completely changed my perspective and had me end up in this space. And it's a space I don't see myself doing anything else besides this now. But possibly, if it wasn't tech, I think working for nonprofits would be something I would be doing if I didn't end up the engineering route.
Very good. What ways do you think you could still improve in your career?
That's a good question. So I think there's a bunch more for me to learn technically about our hardware. I think there's just so much to learn. So I feel really gaining a full understanding of all of our business we do at Northrop, and learning about all the components that kind of go into these insane feats of engineering is something that I think I could do better. Something else is to really start memorizing all of our specifications, because I do have to go back and look them up and read through them every time I get a new one for, let's say, torquing or all these requirements. So just building that technical experience. I'm 2.5 years in, so I got a long ways to go. And then something else that I'm actively working on is Northrop also has a bunch of mentorship programs. So I have gotten accepted into our MTP program, which is mentoring the technical professionals. It's a competitive program you have to apply for. So I'm currently in the midst of getting connected with a mentor, and something long-term I'd like to do is get more involved on Northrop's international business side. I think, once I get my technical tools under my belt, I think I'd like to go towards figuring out how we can create strategically more value for the company, but reaching out internationally, since it's a very niche area in aerospace and defense. Most of our our customers are here. So I think it's a new area for Northrop's business to grow in, and it's something I'd like to get involved in through that program. which is how I can better myself.
Great. What is the work-life balance like at Northrop?
Honestly, it's great. I feel spoiled for my area specifically right now. I know when we have like hard deadlines to meet, you know, you might put in a few more hours every week, which is fine. So I think overall it's great, you know, living in Southern California, the beach is here, the weather's here. So I feel like everyone really takes advantage of that and like values their time outside of work because the weather's so great and it's so nice outside. So I do think the work-life balance here overall is pretty great, given that there is no hot deadline. When there's hot deadlines, then it's it can get a little crazy.
Question from Alexander here. What kind of experiences would lead to a security clearance? You mentioned that it's a very sought after trade.
So working for the US, you know, military industrial base as a whole can help you get that. I think until you get a job at these companies, I think it's a bit difficult to, you know, obtain it. I think a lot of companies, they are expensive. So they want to, you know, get clearances for people like they're investing in that they think are going to stay around for a while. So I think unless you're involved, like for example, in an ROTC program or, you know, have former military experience is a bit difficult. So I think a way to, you know, maybe finding smaller contractors that might help you, you know, what's it called? Sponsor your security clearance. That is a potential way. That's how it happened for me. I wasn't actively looking for a way to obtain a security clearance. That also fell in my lap. But I think those things can help you. And then also, you know, securing positions at Northrop. I know a ton of my peers got their roles from conferences like SWE and I'm drawing a blank on the other ones. I'm sorry. A few of the other conferences and you know, networking with recruiters is probably your best way to, you know, get your name out there for a role at one of these companies.
Great. Any special training you received so far?
So there's no formal training at Northrop, at least within that I've experienced. So a lot of training has come from my senior members of my teams, you know, taking me under their wing and like teaching me absolutely everything they know. For example, my current lead is absolutely outstanding at his job and makes everything so easy to learn. And like, he saves me so much time by being able to, you know, give me the information as opposed to me suffering through trying to figure it out. So I'm like, that to me is the most valuable training I've received. But Northrop does do some education sponsorship. You have a budget of $10,000 a year for if you want to pursue your master's, that can cover, you know, part of your master's. I did a systems engineering certificate course with Caltech through Northrop through this like Edisys program. And I think that has been also invaluable in terms of the production experience. So for those who don't know, like systems engineering, it happens throughout the entire life cycle of the product. And there's like a V between, this is like design, down here is implementation, and then there's like requirements and verification that go through. So developing requirements is on this side and verifying them is up on this side of the V. And then this side is the testing and then delivering stages. So for me, like that, getting that education has definitely helped me figure out where I fit in the puzzle piece and like where my requirements are flowing down from and like what I need to do to deliver a good product to the next part of like the V, which is like integration and test. So I think although there isn't necessarily formal on the job training, I think there's plenty of opportunity for you to get funding for things you would like to learn about that can help you be better at your job.
Great. What is the work culture like?
Northrop is super fun. It's, I would say, not like a casual in terms of a startup environment, but it's not super formal, if that makes sense. I feel like it's a typical engineering environment. We're not like on the business and banking side of formal. We're not like, we don't get like pool tables at work type of casual, but I think I've not come across like a group of people at Northrop I don't like. I was actually so pleasantly surprised when I first started how easy it was to talk to absolutely everyone. Everyone's willing to help each other out. I definitely feel like there is a huge teamwork like what's what I'm looking for? There's a lot of, it's a collaborative environment. You know, at the end of the day, every single person's goal is to deliver hardware to our customer. You know, we don't have jobs unless we do that. So even though we might have different ways of doing it, either designing part of it or building or testing, um, all of us together, like we want to deliver our hardware. So I definitely feel that that sentiment is shared across the company.
Great, thank you, Laura. Where and how does Northrop use additive manufacturing?
So I have not necessarily come across additive manufacturing at work. I know we have like a fab lab, so it's basically like NYU had a maker space. It's an area where you can kind of go in and like play around with the tools we have in there and build something you want for yourself. So there's a bunch of like 3D printers. So I haven't necessarily worked on applications that require that. I do know I've read articles of other people with who are kind of developing new design using the like additive manufacturing principles. So I have not personally seen it. I know it does exist, and I know there's ways to experience it if it's not in your current role, if that's something you'd like to play around with.
Cool. What is the, I think we're almost approaching the top of the hour here.
Mm-hmm.
A few more questions. What is the most valuable lesson you have learned so far in your job?
So the most valuable thing I've learned that isn't necessarily related to, you know, my job requirements or my statement of work is, you know, when looking for a new job, I think it's equally important to interview your manager and see, you know, if your manager is a good fit for you and if they are someone you feel like can support you. I feel like it's a huge thing in interviewing your team. I think just as important as you enjoying, you know, your statement of work is you enjoying the people you work with. So I feel like that's something I never thought about before. I'm like, oh, I love my job, like whatever. But I think that's a huge thing is definitely like figuring out a fit for a team, not necessarily just the work, but like how you will fit in like the way that team functions, and then what your management will look like, and you know how supportive you feel they are of their, you know, direct reports. I think that's the biggest thing I can offer. I mean, I have that luxury now since I am like employed in the company, and I can, you know, reach out and, you know, network with these people and see that. It's a bit difficult when you're trying to you know, change companies, for example, or, you know, get your first job. I think it's a bit difficult to do that. But I think, you know, as your career progresses, something you want to look for is like a great team to work for.
That's very good advice, Laura. Have you made any mistakes as an engineer, and how did you fix them?
So I'm not perfect, but I can't recall anything big enough that was, you know, harmed hardware. So that's great. I've been able to learn from, you know, like as level one, or level one, level two engineer, you do have responsibility for work, but you know, the way it's structured is right in the beginning of your career. You know, if your mishaps, like if you do have a mishap, it doesn't like adversely affect the program or the hardware as a whole, you know. And as you gain more technical experience, you get more responsibility, therefore your mistakes have more consequences. So for myself, you know, I was able to learn from people who did have that responsibility and from their mistakes. For example, you know, not listing out our ESD versus EESD requirements for hardware was a mistake I saw, and the issue with ESD sensitivities, if you don't meet the requirements for ESD, is that you can have latent failure in your hardware. There's no way to test for ESD damage. So it can be, the hardware can be great, working fine, testing perfectly fine on down here on Earth, and then once it goes into orbit, you know, it might even work for a year or two and then fail prematurely because of like ESD damage. So I was able to, you know, learn from other people's like mistakes and the corrective actions of the entire group to make sure that I don't make those mistakes that can like harden the hardware in the long run, for example, with ESD.
Great. Is there anything, I think we're just looking at more questions here. Looks like I think we've gone through all of them. Is there anything that I haven't asked you, Laura, that you wish to share with the audience here?
Hmm.
I feel like we covered a lot, but is there
Like
any?
you did. Let me see. I feel like, is there
How
any?
about how about sharing something about Northrop that not many people know? Anything?
I guess something that like, this is not even a great fact, but like a fun fact I learned is that there's like a Northrop location in every single state in the US. So although like the bigger sites, I would say are Space Park where I currently work in Redondo Beach. It's where we pretty much develop most of our space vehicles. Palmdale is the aircraft like production center of excellence. San Diego is our unmanned aircraft design center, and then Melbourne, Florida is our manned aircraft design center. So I think those are like the pretty big hubs. And that, I guess something else that I didn't know about the defense industry as a whole is that a lot of the programs that these companies get contracted out to like each other. So for example, Lockheed Martin got contracted the F-35 and they subcontracted us to build the fuselage. So it really truly takes like an army of people and engineers to put together these amazing products that the defense industry has created, like fighter jets and even some of the satellites we do, and like the James Webb Space Telescope, which hopefully will be launching this year, crossing our fingers. So I guess that the industry is very interwoven with all these companies, so you will probably support similar programs no matter which one of like the big companies you work for. I guess is something that's like interesting that I had no idea. And then also a fear I had before starting working was for some reason I was totally convinced when I started working at Northrop they were going to have me design an entire airplane like wing by myself and like have me have to do it in like 6 months and make sure it all works. And I was like, I'm going to fail at my job. But it takes years and years and years and years of development and people to actually, develop the product we do. So you're not expected to know everything. You do have the support system of like an entire army of people behind you, like developing these products.
You mentioned that aerospace has had its slow time. So how optimistic are you about the future of the aerospace industry?
I'm so excited. I think we are definitely on the up end. There are so many aerospace startups. So I know like companies like Northrop and Lockheed and NASA have been able to like survive the lull because of our government budgets and like them giving us money. But I think the rise of all of these aerospace startups, obviously SpaceX, right? I feel like Elon definitely put aerospace on the radar again. But there's so many other companies. There's Relativity Space that are 3D printing rockets. There's Boom Supersonic, which is looking to bring back supersonic commercial travel like the Concorde, but using all of the new technological advancements. There's Firefly, that's also another rocket company as a startup. So I'm very excited. There's also like new drone companies that are looking to get contracts from like the government. So I think the space is growing rapidly. I think there's going to be a ton of transformation in the product and the way we develop things. I'm excited to see how Northrop, keeps up with the change and, with all the competition that's starting to arise. So I think the industry is going to keep growing. I think with the interest of, getting a base on the moon, and then eventually, like Relativity's whole mission is to get to Mars and be able to 3D print rockets on Mars and, start doing additive manufacturing on other planets. I think that this industry is going to grow, and I'm like very excited to see where it goes.
Last question here from Alexander. Where can we find more information on the current project that Northrop is doing?
I mean, you can always just go to Northrop's website. It's broken out by sectors. You can even like look at the news. You can Google, news, Northrop Grumman contracts, and see like what new business we're getting. We just got the GBSD contract as a prime contractor, which is a huge win for the company. There's like other aircraft going on. We got the contract or won the contract a few years ago for the new B-2, the B-21 Raider. So there's a plate like, doing research either through Northrop's website or just Googling like Northrop in the news will show you like what new programs we're getting and like what's starting up at the company and like what we're currently sustaining.
Great, thank you so much, Laura. We're now at the top of the hour, so we're going to wrap up the event unless you have any last comment or any last advice to give to our audience.
I think that's everything. I mean, you know, I know if a lot of you are, you know, newer hires, is to stay positive throughout the entire job application process. You know, it's difficult, it's competitive, and, you know, just have some faith in yourself and it'll all work out, you know, with some time. So just stay positive, you know, go and like strive and achieve your goals and like work hard, and it'll all, you know, you'll end up where you want to end up. Just maintain that mindset, and you know, keep networking, and having resources like this is great for you to, you know, start thinking about what you want out of your career and like getting that exposure very early on.
Great, thank you so much again, Laura. So we're going to wrap it up here. So for the audience here, thank you all so much for attending today's webinar. I hope you all had, I hope you all found it very insightful. This webinar has been recorded and will be available online at www.asme.org in a few days. And lastly, in a few minutes, we'll send you a short survey. So please be so kind and give us your feedback so we can bring you speakers and topics that are the most interest to you in the future. So thank you again, and see you soon on our next webinar in April with a guest speaker from Boeing. Thank you. Bye-bye, and stay safe.